Manoj, thank you very much for sparing the time.
Absolutely.
So the Naked Group is a very interesting organization, and it's actually one that is taught about in the classroom at CEIBS. My colleague, Professor Lydia Price, wrote this case, Naked Group, Purpose-Driven Growth. So maybe we can start with that theme. It seems to me that Naked Group seeks to live out purpose in everything it does, including in terms of the partner ecosystem it cultivates. So maybe you could start off on that note.
Okay. So Naked Group, as you may know, it got started in 2007, and initially it was built to create some opportunities to relax and just get away from the city more for ourselves. I came to China in 2005, and Grant Horsfield, who's my partner and the founder of Naked Group, he had moved to China from South Africa around the same time that I did, and we met through Shanghai connections. And while Shanghai was offering some great opportunities, like any other metropolitan city would, in terms of dining and bars and clubs, and it's a great city with a lot of activities. But what was lacking at that time was a place to get away from the city hustle and bustle, and just to be in the nature. And especially for Grant, who had moved here from South Africa, if you go to Cape Town or other cities in South Africa, the natural lifestyle coexists very closely with the city lifestyle. You can go surfing, you can go mountain hiking, you can go scuba diving, etc. So more than anything else, he missed that. And a vacation that him and I took to Vietnam, we came across this small area called the Jungle Beach, which was very, very basic, but had this feeling that you can relax and you can just forget about all the stresses and strains you have. And that time we felt that this is what is missing in China.
Right.
So the find of Morgan Shan in an accidental way was initiated by this experience we had in Vietnam. And it started off with one house, just one simple farmhouse, converted into a livable place with some modern amenities, but otherwise it looked like a village house. And the purpose came from the fact that we were going to the nature. And the reason we were attracted to that part is because the nature is there in such a pure form. And we wanted to maintain that. As we started to grow, we created this tree called the Naked Tree. And the Naked Tree defined what was our core mission and what were our values and what were our the founding principles. And in those principles, it defines that we focus on working hard and playing hard. Also being saying that we try to be environmentally friendly, but we are not perfect. But we try our best to live something simple, sustainable, and healthy. So that Naked Tree started to define where the company is and where it should go based on its core values and principles. And if you read the words in that Naked Tree, those words are actually a lot more applicable today than they were 15 years ago when the tree was originally built. It talks about supporting communities where we do our business. It talks about being environmentally friendly. So all the buzzwords, ESG and zero carbon and rural tourism, all of those things that are becoming more mainstream today, they were included, and that sort of gave us the foundation for the purpose. By being environmentally friendly and by focusing on creating something natural, something pure, it allowed us legitimately to call ourselves Naked. So Naked is a very catchy name. So from a marketing point of view, if you're called Naked, people will remember. And it allows us to be a little bit naughty. And it allows us to create play on words without being crude. So there is a marketing purpose to this purpose that we have with respect to the environment friendliness. Also, a purpose-driven organization will fail if it doesn't produce profits, because for it to be sustainable from environmental sense, it needs to be sustainable from economic sense. When I was talking to Professor Lydia, and she was working with Mars about this purpose-driven organizations, we spoke about if purpose was just a charity,
right.
Then it only goes so far, and then it dies. It can have a charity element as a catalyst that kickstarts a certain, but for it to sustain,
right.
It needs to be able to have economic sustainability.
Yes. And that research that Mars had done in collaboration with Oxford resulted in this book called Putting Purpose into Practice, where they highlight very much the importance of the partner ecosystem. I only recently came across this work, but my own work, which was about big companies and startups engaging with each other, and I have a copy of the book to give you. You mentioned South Africa. The last chapter highlights some of my research in South Africa, West Africa, where we have a small campus. And especially in Africa, I was realizing that corporates and startups partnering together could have economic payoff, but also contribute to one of the or more of the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals. So I was thinking these kinds of partner engagements within a wider ecosystem should be part of SDG 17, Partnerships for the Goals. That's also very consistent with what the book Putting Purpose into Practice talks about. So tell us a little bit about the ecosystem of partners. So if you go to Moganshan, you're working with local communities. In China, we know very well that local governments are very important. So cultivating a partner ecosystem must be integral to what you do.
No, it's absolutely essential. Whether it's China or Africa or India, I think to a certain extent that local buy-in and local pride and local fulfillment becomes very key to the success of whatever project you may do. So, and the local governments play a critical role in creating some of the foundational work that's needed. So, getting that support from the local government. And why is it important for the local government to support something that may seem like it's a corporate benefit? You're doing it to make money, so to speak. But so you need to first educate the local governments where the education is needed, that yes, it will create profits for the company, but it will also create jobs. It will also create a supplier system. It will also bring people from outside of that local area, from the large cities. Now, when we got started in Moganshan, there weren't that many people who were actually living there, not young people anyway. And mostly people were 70 years and older. The young adults had moved to big cities because the jobs were in the big cities. But if you bring back jobs, it also brings back people, because now they can live in their ancestral homes with their parents and their children, and they can make a meaningful earning within the city. And this is again not a charity. From a company point of view, if I hire a local person and train the local person in what we need him or her to do, I am likely to have longer retention, because that person lives there. So that's point number one. Point number two is that if I give that person sense of pride that even in this my little small village, there is this famous place, whether it's naked or something else, there is a sense of pride that this is, people come and talk about my town, Moganshan or Li Shui or Shinmi or other small villages that we are in. It gives them a feeling of pride and fulfillment versus I work in Shanghai and, I live in some, crummy quarters because I can't afford housing in Shanghai, and my kids live with my old parents. The lifestyle itself is pretty harsh, and there is no sense of pride or fulfillment. So bringing those young working adults back to the villages, it not only reduces a little bit of congestion in the big cities,
Yes.
But it also brings the working force back to the villages where they grew up.
Right.
And like I said, the benefit that we get is longer retention, and the local government also get higher taxes from multiple streams. It's good for the government, it's good for the local people in terms of jobs, but it's also good for the local people in creating small business opportunities that in the past either didn't exist or were difficult. And it's good for visitors because they get to have a genuine out of the city experience. So when Naked Group got started in 2007, there were old houses and population only of 70 and above. If you go there today, there are more than 800 minsus that have propped up over the last 10 years or so. And all those now, are those all minsus profitable or not? I can't say that for sure, but many of them must be because, economic theory says that profit attracts competition.
Right.
If profits are being made, more competitors will come, and it will, innovation will take place, and it creates, the size of the pie becomes bigger and bigger. Right. You reach a point where everybody lives a, sustainably profitable life, so to speak. So that activity has created has made Moganshan sort of the benchmark for other governments to come and see how do I replicate that in my area. And it's also in alignment with what the China government's trying to do. How do you make the rural areas of China economically active, or you can call it rural revitalization, but it's essentially to create economic activities where currently only beautiful places exist and the economic activity is absent.
That's a very, very fascinating story, and it seems like you have addressed so many different pain points in the ecosystem, and there are positive spillovers. Let's talk about Shanghai though. So Moganshan was to get away from the hustle and bustle of Shanghai, but at one point you were also actively looking at what you could do in Shanghai. I think the months we are holding says Naked Hubs.
Right, correct.
So tell us a little bit about that and what eventually happened in terms of WeWork acquiring it.
Right. So Naked Hub got started based on 2 or 3 factors. So the first factor was that we already had capabilities and infrastructure in place because of our resort business that can easily allow us to start a business like Naked Hub. And what are those things? So first, we had our own design studio that was capable in designing beautiful exteriors, but as well beautiful interiors. So when you design a co-working place, one of the main features of a co-working place is it should look cool. People like to be part of a co-working place because it's cooler than their office. So that capability existed. We didn't have to buy that. Second, we had a project team that was capable of building resorts in the mountains with hundreds of different units. So to do a construction of that level is very complicated. To do something like that in a city square on a floor of 1,000 to 2,000 square meter is quite trivial compared to what you would need to do. So the project management capabilities, the design capabilities existed. Then we also had the technology team that is also critical to a co-working business because typically co-working places are fairly high technology savvy. Technology is being used to create a better experience.
Right.
And fourth factor in this equation on the capability and infrastructure is that we already had a fairly large database of decision makers who were our guests. In resorts, people who were able to afford, naked retreat, getaway vacations. These were people who were typically, high ups in organization who could make a decision that I want to move my office from my current lease. So these were the capabilities. going to the other part, which is the purpose. So how's the purpose related to Naked Hub? You can say that I can understand that in the mountains it's close to nature, but in the city of Shanghai. So if you look at co-working place, and I'll give you some stats, you take any office, any corporate office in Shanghai, Beijing, Hong Kong, doesn't matter, and you take the total square meter of that office and divide that by number of people who work in that office. That number will roughly be around 15 to 20 square meters, depending on how much extra space you have or not. So what that says is that in a typical corporate office, you need 15 to 20 square meter space on a per employee basis. A properly designed co-working place, that number goes down to about 5 to 6. So three times. So there is a 75% efficiency gain or utilization gain. Now, does that mean that I'm sitting next to my colleague and it's uncomfortable? No, it's not. So where the gain is coming from is in every corporate office, there will be a area where you assemble. You have a town hall or you have quarterly meetings, etc. And that's you're the only company using that space. Okay, there is a boardroom which has 20 seats. How often that room is being used, point number one. How often that room is being used with 20 people. So yeah, you might be having a meeting with 4 people in a boardroom, but the 4 people room is already occupied. So there is a lot of wastage in terms of utilization in office space, and also how you build corridors and how you minimize unusable space in that part of the interior design lessons we learned as we design. So if you design a space where the meeting rooms, the printing machines, the pantry, the assembly area, in a way that not one company but 50 companies are sharing, and there are multiple of these places, and it's all bookable. Like I said, technology plays a big role. So from a sustainability point of view, 3 times the space that we need in our world already there. Now we just have to utilize it better. When we were in this business, the market share for co-working with respect to the office space was about 2-3%. But if that share can go from 2-3% to 10-15%, because I'm not expecting everybody to give up their offices and move to co-working companies. That 10-15% can create a massive impact on the new offices that don't need to be constructed, and the amount of glass and cement and the woodwork and all of that goes into every time you move an office and redesign. All of that can stay wherever it is. So there was a sustainability angle to this city project that we did, but it also created collaboration between the companies. So if I'm in the same space and I'm having coffee or beer or some events, I'm more likely to run into other companies and probably do some sort of collaboration or talk about what I'm doing, and it creates more innovation and collaboration. Versus if you're in an A-grade building, the only time you see other company people in an elevator, and there is no talk, there is no communication, there is no interaction, and you don't even know that who's on the floor above you or floor below you. You have zero idea. So there is zero interaction. And we used to call it vertical community. You create this vertical community in a building because everybody, whether they are being on an app or whether you are being in a common place, and then if you can connect different buildings through the app or through interaction, then you create these horizontal communities from one building to another, and you become part of, we call them hubbers. So if you are part of Naked Hub, you are a hubber. So that tag creates a feeling of belonging, and the feeling of belonging creates the sense of community. So the community part, which is also part of our purpose to create the community, was also being served. So that's sort of the Naked Hub, how it came about and how it...
very interesting. It reminds me of 2 things. One, one of the very few upsides of the Shanghai lockdown. Neighbors and compounds discovered who each other were.
Correct.
And also in the book, I talk about how in accelerator spaces that big companies create, sometimes you're not sure whether anything good comes of it, but sometimes you have serendipity. Unexpectedly, 2-3 startups form a three-way relationship with the big company, that sort of thing.
No, so you're absolutely right in saying the serendipity plays a big role. And we didn't use the word serendipity, but what we used to call is that we create spaces to facilitate what's called the water cooler conversation. So it's a meeting that I didn't plan, but I ran into the CEO and I talked about this idea, and boom, something happened. By creating spaces, you can actually create the flow of people, where people are going to be. And if you bring people together by giving them some incentive, the water cooler conversation or the serendipity starts to take place. So it's a little bit kind of designed, but it happens naturally.
But then you got out of this business.
So we got out of this business. It wasn't planned, and WeWork, which later on they ran into some troubles, etc. So they were the 2,000-pound gorilla, and we were the little kid, the new kid in town, so to speak. Having said that, co-working, when it mushroomed, there was WeWork. That's a number one, and I would say that Naked Group or Naked Hub was maybe 1/10 the size of WeWork, but we were fairly close to number 2 globally. So there were hundreds of places around the world and in China that were 5-6 locations. So it's easy to go to 1, 2 to 5. But to go from 5 to 50, it requires a different scale. So not many people cross that scale. And because WeWork was about to go IPO in the US, it was critical from our understanding, it was critical for them to be number 1 and undisputed number 1. And they couldn't get to undisputed number 1, which the position they enjoyed everywhere else. That was not the case in Shanghai. So it was more critical for them to actually acquire Naked Hub than it was for Naked Hub to sell. So that was one main reason for them to acquire us. And the second reason was that their design team, their marketing team, and their technology team, they were all based in New York. And if they were to be serious about China and they were to grow in China, they need to build these three teams, marketing, technology, and design, that will support the China business, which will take time. So this was also an incentive for them to take what Naked had already done and then grow, inorganically rather than grow from scratch. So it was more from their point of view, and we sort of sold Naked Hub, wondering whether we actually really want to do that or not. In retrospect, it looks like the smartest decision we could have made, but that's more luck for us and lack thereof for WeWork, but that was not the decision-making route, the way it looks looking back with the pandemic and all the things that went on. But we are still shareholder of WeWork China. We are not operationally involved. We are on the board of WeWork China. So we are still engaged with WeWork, and WeWork China is doing well.
Manoj, very fascinating story. So you have a very fascinating background, a PhD in chemical engineering, but you also went to business school in Chicago. You worked for multinational automotive companies. I think that's how you came to China in the first place, 18 years ago. What would you say to young MBA students, as they look ahead to their careers? They're starting their careers in this so-called decade of action. How to make sense of sustainability, purpose on the one hand, purpose, and being commercially successful on the other hand?
So my journey is not a typical journey. I did a PhD first and then an MBA second, which most people wouldn't go in that order. Normally you would do a master's degree and a PhD degree. And that's because after having done my PhD and when I was working, I realized that I was not enjoying what I was doing. So it's not that I was not profitably employed. I was, but it wasn't giving me sense of fulfillment that I'm making a contribution for which I studied at that time. So it was sort of a going back to square one and see that what would make me happy. And I spoke to several of my friends and got advice from others who were doing their own journeys. At that point, I realized that I really wanted to do something entrepreneurial and to make a bigger impact, and that was important to me. And everybody has their own, points of satisfaction. So it's an individual sort of journey that you need to do that fulfills what makes you happy. But I didn't have any business background from my family point of view or any education point of view. I had zero. So that's what sort of prompted me to do my MBA to build a foundation that I didn't have. Having done PhD gave me the skill of problem solving. So going to MBA school was driven with the purpose of doing something entrepreneurial. But when I graduated and we were on the verge of, we as in me and some of my classmates, we said, oh, let's do something together. If I were to go into entrepreneurial world where things are uncertain, who would pay my student loans, which I taken to go to MBA school. So reason I joined corporate, I went to the corporate route first, was essentially to pay off the loans. So it was, okay, I need to take this detour so that I can get back to, why I went to the business school to begin with. My Goodyear journey, went much better than I had hoped or planned. And I was climbing the corporate ladder faster than I wanted, which kept me in there, but it was still taking me away from what I wanted to do, which was entrepreneurial. And at one point I needed to make a hard decision, and my wife was instrumental in that, because going to do something entrepreneurial at an age when you already have children and wife, the responsibility is not just for you, but also for others who have come to rely on you. And Grant and I, we were friends before Naked got started, and so eventually when I went to Naked, it gave me the best I could, because it was a business that was already in place, and I was plugging in as a partner rather than starting from scratch. So it gave me that much confidence. And then my wife said that if things go upside down, then she can always go back to work and support the family. So the advice that to the young MBA students, they need to have a very clear understanding that why they are actually doing an MBA. That's a question that's asked in every MBA school essays. And it's more than a trivial essay that you write to get in. It's an essay, my opinion is that the schools ask for that essay to force you to reflect. And the more genuinely you reflect, either while applying or while you're in MBA, but definitely before you graduate, that why did you choose to spend 500,000 or 100,000 RMB or 100,000 US dollars or whatever it costs? It's a fairly large investment. And if you don't have a very clear answer to that question, it's a return that has an uncertain ROI. Because it's an investment in you, and you better make sure that it's done with a very, very clear purpose on what you want to achieve. And going back to the other purpose that you're talking about, if some of the students say want to get into this purpose-driven profit organization, its purpose is achieving certain community benefits, but it is also creating a point of differentiation, both from market point of view, that how the market sees you, and how your employee see you. If you have a purpose, which is more than just making money, so yes, you need to make money because otherwise you will not last, but the purpose will allow you to attract talent that already has attraction to whatever the purpose that you are serving for the society, for the community, as well as it allows you to differentiate from the crowd, that you are doing it with this as your core and not just as a fashion trend that you happen to see. So advice to, again, to the MBA students, purpose is not without profit. It has marketing benefits, it has society and community benefits. It also has benefits in terms of attracting the right talent to your company.
Absolutely fantastic, Manoj.
Oh, thank you.
Inspiring and insightful. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks, Dr. Shameen.